Welcome, birders. This is Ed Pullen, your host on the Bird Banter podcast, where birders talk birding. I'm not going to give a typical introduction to this episode. I simply want to set the scene. On this episode, Ken Brown, my birding buddy, you remember Ken from episode number 2, the very first episode with a guest, Ken and I go birding in southeast Washington in Walla Walla County, and I arranged to meet up with Mike Denny to show us around the area and help us find some great gray owls. Great gray owls were, if we found them, and we did, are a first Washington sighting for me, a new state bird, which is exciting for me, a lister, of course. And the Blue Mountain Range is a large mountain range, about 400 miles long and 100 miles wide, quite a unique habitat that lays in northeast Oregon and southeast Washington. Walla Walla County includes a lot of that, and we sit down in a remote area on the Jasper Mountain in the Northern Blues with Mike Denny and Ken Brown right after we find a family of great gray owls. So I use an omnidirectional mic. Birders, listen up, see how many species you can identify. You'll also hear the great gray owl chicks begging and occasionally hear an adult great gray respond to them. So it's a pretty cool place to do a podcast. I really had fun. It was hard to stay focused on the interview because every now and then we just go, oh my gosh, listen to that. Wow, that's cool. So you'll occasionally hear an interlude like that where we get distracted by the birds around us. So I hope you enjoy the Bird Banter podcast, episode number 63 with Mike Denny. Hey birds, this is Ed Pullen, your host on the Bird Banter podcast, and I am sitting here someplace, I'm not even sure where, in the northern Blue Mountains with Mike Denny and Ken Brown. Mike is the kind of a birding guru of Walla Walla County, and he brought Ken and me out here to see great gray owls, a first Washington bird for me. So Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Beyond my pleasure. It's so cool. Terrific pleasure. Anyway, to sit here and listen to these great gray owl chicks, you might hear them in the background. So, Mike, tell me about your experience with great gray owls in the Northern Blues.
Well, the Northern Blues are known to host the densest population of great gray owls in the Northern Hemisphere. And in the late 90s into the early 2000s, we know that there were at least 52 pair, and probably still averages that same number this day and age. Great gray owls are present from about 3,800 feet to about 4,500 feet.
So a really narrow range.
Narrow band. And they are the largest in size of any owl in Washington State. They're 27 inches high, but they are all fluff. They weigh, male weighs about 1.25 pounds, pound and 1.8 pounds. Females can reach 2 pounds. They are a massive bird, wing-wise. They have a 47-inch wingspan, and they are silent. Absolutely silent when they fly. Their primary prey base in the Blue Mountains are red-backed vole, pocket gophers, chipmunks, and they will on occasion take meadow voles as well. I always, when I see them take a chipmunk, I always consider it ironic justice, because early in the spring, chipmunks wipe out most ground nesting bird nests.
Oh, okay.
Because there's fewer insects in there after protein. They find these nests and they will eat the eggs. But the birds always double clutch and they bring on a new set of eggs. And by then the insect numbers are much higher and the chipmunks leave the bird nest mostly alone. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But so the great gray owls come in and grab chipmunks early in the spring.
Yeah, it says keeping the population of chipmunks down, so they might have a chance for the little birds next
That's
year.
right.
Cool.
That's right.
Oh, that is so freaking cool. Those birds branching like that when they flap their wings.
Isn't
oh,
that something?
That is so cool.
So
wings.
Great gray owls are found in a lot of the drainages of the Blues, and they are usually very, very silent. You don't hear the adults very much until they get on a nest. And then you will hear location calls the female gives, and that's to ensure the male that she's still sitting on that platform, on that nest. And she will call about once every 10 or 12 minutes. She'll give a location call.
Just a hoot.
Just a
One.
and that's it.
Got to be patient to hear those
yes.
guys.
And then the male will give a woof. And that's to let her know that he's in the area. And once the chicks hatch, and they hatch about 28 hours apart. So there is a dominant chick that is established early on and fed early on. And they continue to hatch in about 28-hour intervals. And the last chick, in this case, this nest, sometimes has 4 eggs. So the dominant chick, the dominant sibling, gets the bulk of the food.
Mm-hmm.
And the 4th chick just does not make it. So today, we've located 3 of the chicks that were hatched, and they were the only 3 we saw this spring. So it's very nice to hear all 3 of them out here.
Yeah, it's got to be good hunting.
Yes, large rodent population here. So the adult male brings food to the nest site. Oftentimes the female will go out to meet him and will not allow the male near the nest. And so that is an unusual thing that this particular species does. We have found great grays, the male will call and then the female will collect the prey item and then take it to the chicks. If the chicks have fledged, and what we've just witnessed, the female will fly in with a prey item and the chicks go bananas because they're all struggling to get to the prey item first. It's competition from the very get-go. And so those chicks all sit together hoping that they will just be able to grab that prey item first. Yeah. And unfortunately for the 3rd chick, he's up over here away from the other 2, and so she's having to feed him separately, which is actually a better strategy because he doesn't have to compete with that second chick.
Yeah, he's probably the smallest one over there.
Well, he's probably the dominant chick.
Oh, the dominant one.
Yes,
okay.
And so he gets fed often and alone, and these 2 smaller ones are battling it out. So the other interesting thing about great grays and the blues is that they are being pressed on all sides. From the higher elevation sites, being pressed by barred owls. Barred owls have moved into the Grand Fir forests where great grays traditionally nest. And no owl in Walla Walla County or Washington State, for that matter, builds its own nest. They are totally reliant on other species for a nest platform. So in the great gray's case, it's usually old hawk platforms or old raven nests. Mm-hmm. This particular pair is unusual because they nest in a pileated woodpecker excavation site.
We saw that. So
yes.
It's giant. It's maybe 18 or 20 inches high and 10 or 12 inches wide and probably 8 inches, 10 inches deep.
Oh, probably 10 inches deep.
It's a big space. But the thought that they can put 3 or 4 eggs in there and raise 3 or 4 young in that little tiny spot is kind of amazing.
And the female often has her tail pushed way up. Look at him.
Yeah, it's almost flying.
Almost, not quite. His whole goal is to exercise those wings by going up and down that branch.
Right.
Yes. So the female often sits compressed in that nest with her tail way up the wall of the interior of that cavity.
Uh-huh.
The male will sometimes, after he feeds the female, will go and sit nearby on a snag, a dead aspen there, and just sit there and watch. Because oftentimes when the male comes in with a prey item, he attracts a raven that keys on him and will come right in hoping to get that prey item or find out where the nest is.
Yeah.
But when he stops, the raven is totally intimidated by the size of the great gray and will not get anywhere near the area where the great gray has come in. And so it will back off. I mentioned barred owls coming in from the higher elevation sites where great grays. So great grays have moved down into second cut sites. And that has pushed them directly into great horned owl territory. And we know that great horned owls will capture and kill great grays, both adults and subadults.
Wow.
And so over out of Somerville, Oregon, near La Grande, Oregon, we have a documented case of a great horned owl killing adult male.
Wow.
Great Gray.
So a great horned, although they, in terms of inches, are smaller, they're almost twice as heavy, or more than twice as
3
heavy.
pounds.
3 pounds, okay.
Yeah.
I had 4, okay,
Yeah.
3 pounds. So they're 1.5 to 2 times bigger.
And they have 300 psi on the tip of their talons, so there's very few species that a great horned cannot take out. They've been documented taking out birds as large as Canada geese with no problem.
Wow.
They often kill red-tailed hawks on their roost and eat them.
Wow.
So a great horned owl is a serious customer. And for them to be pressing from the lower elevations up and barred owls coming in from the higher elevations, great grays are in a very narrow band now. And I'm extremely concerned about them in the Blue Mountains because of that. The other big issue is that great grays don't have much fear of human beings. And they often will sit on a trunk of a tree or a stump near a road, and people hit them with cars or shoot at them. And so their population gets diminished that way. We have, unfortunately, a percentage of very ignorant individuals that think that everything in the woods is up to be shot. And they do that. And so it's really unfortunate. Great gray owls are protected both federally and state, and they are on the critical list in Washington State. So we're very fortunate to be sitting here watching these chicks and this adult.
Let's just listen for a second. You can hear the chicks doing their squawking noise up here if we listen carefully. That was it.
And that call is their location call to the adult. Hey, we're over here. Bring
me some
bring
food,
the chipmunk over here.
Yeah, very cool. So great grays are one of the iconic species of the blues. Tell me a little bit. You mentioned earlier the sort of crazy geologic origins of the Blue Mountains. That was just nuts.
So there is a theory among geologists that the Blue Mountains slid in here eons ago, and they have andesite all over the blues, and it is crystalline. The crystalline formation of this andesite is identical to the Andes Mountains and to islands in the South Pacific. So this particular basalt is called andesite because of its match to the Andes. And so as a result of that, the Blue Mountains are kind of an island. And in the natural world, they have certain species that other mountain ranges in the West do not have. And they lack certain species which all other ranges in the West have, like cedar trees. We have no cedar trees in the Blue Mountains. There is a family of salamanders that live all the way around the Blue Mountains called plethodons, which are not found in the Blue Mountains. There are several flower species that are endemic to the Blue Mountains, found nowhere else. 4 years ago, 7 species of plants were discovered in the Blue Mountains that had remained undiscovered up until just 4 years ago.
So there are still things to discover in this world.
Yes, many of them. And so I have had the good fortune of seeing 3 of those plants. And it's one's a paintbrush, one's a grass species, and one is a phlox species. And it's just totally amazing. So the Blue Mountains biologically are still being discovered. And that's what's exciting. So a lot of the bird species that live in the blues are fairly well understood. It's the plant world that's not understood very well, or the Lepidoptera, the butterflies. Mm-hmm. And so that is really interesting. But the birds in this area are here in mass. We get large numbers despite what has been discovered. So I will share with you quickly. In the early 1990s, David DeSanti from Point Reyes Bird Observatory came up here, and I helped him establish 9 banding stations looking at recruitment into neotropic migrant bird populations with their young.
So recruitment, help me understand what that is.
And that is when birds nest and pull off young. DeSanti and his crews would misnet those young birds and ban them. And then they would look for them in Central and South America and on their migratory routes down through California, Arizona, New Mexico.
Okay.
So what they discovered was that we were losing 3% of our young birds were never returning to this forest. And with a loss like that of 3% a year, that becomes a high number of birds that are not returning. And so it becomes a real concern.
So, Mike, by not returning, you mean just didn't make it through the winter?
Just couldn't survive.
That's of the adults?
This is adults.
This coming back, returning first-year
adults,
birds.
Oh, first-year birds that didn't return.
birds.
Okay.
Right, did not return.
Is this beyond the mortality of like 80%?
Correct. So, here's what David DeSanti discovered, and it just blew me away. He discovered that this forest in the northern Blue Mountains is not affected by El Nino, but La Nina from the Atlantic.
Holy mackerel.
So a finger of moist weather comes across central Canada, loops down through the Selkirk Mountains in northeastern Washington, and into the northern Blues.
So that's the same curve you see of species range maps, isn't it?
Exactly. And so it is what we call the Canadian finger, comes across, drops down into northeast Washington and into the northern Blue
I
Mountains.
didn't know it came down this far.
And so when La Nina hits the Atlantic coast, our birds have to pull off their young later in the year. Therefore, the young do not have the time to gain fat reserves they require to migrate south.
Wow.
And so what's been discovered is that because of that lack of fat on their migratory way south, many of them succumb to starvation.
Just don't make it.
So most of our birds, when they migrate, are molt migrators.
Correct.
So they're not even going all the way south.
Right.
They're going like, they don't have enough to make it to Arizona.
Correct. And so they are in trouble when La Nina hits the Atlantic coast. So there is a paper that David DeSanti published on the whole thing, and it can be found online. It is absolutely phenomenal.
I'll have you send me that
Yes.
reference, and I'll put it in the podcast notes and on
Yes.
the blog post that goes along with this.
Okay.
So help me. The in terms of this southward migration, do those birds go back around all the way to the Atlantic and down, or do they fly straight down?
They head straight south. And so they go down through California, Arizona, some through New Mexico into Chihuahua.
And do they come back
And
the same
Sonora.
route, or do they go around?
Some go through the Midwest and around. Some come straight north.
Depends on the species.
Yes. So it is truly phenomenal.
It is.
And so more work that's done in the Blue Mountains because of our odd geology, are being affected by La Nina off the Atlantic coast. It is different than anything in the Cascades,
Very
different anything in the Selkirks or in Idaho.
Even in the Rockies. So
Even
it's-
in the Rockies,
Yeah,
yeah.
very different.
I'm wondering, does that tie into the arboreal forest in Canada and how it goes into the eastern species followed up?
Absolutely perceptive. So we have a species of owl here that was discovered in 1987, and that's a boreal owl. Were
Way down
found
here.
in the northern Blues,
Way down
nesting
here.
and common. And so it was like, how come it took us till 1987 to find this unusual, unexpected owl species? Well, they are attracted to any elevation above 5,000 feet with grand and alpine fir, subalpine fir. And so there they were. And so once again, the Blue Mountains shine because here is a species no one even was looking for in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
Because it was assumed they weren't high enough. We didn't have the elevation to provide as hosts.
This is a random, completely off-topic subject. Are they called the Blue Mountains because they look blue, or how did they get that name?
They actually look blue. If you're down in the lower Columbia Basin and you look east, you'll see these blue, hazy mountains.
Okay.
If you look from Idaho in these Seven Devils and you look this way to the west, you'll see these blue, hazy mountains. And another reason was when the tribes were the only people here, they would frequently burn areas and to bring the grass up for their horses. And that smoke would hang here in the fall, and it looked
haze.
blue. Yes.
Okay.
So the Blue Mountains were famous because they were an impediment to settlement in the 18th and 19th century, because they are a serious mountain range.
Yeah.
They're 100 miles across and 400 miles long.
So north to south long.
North to south long. So they fill all of northeastern Oregon and a portion of southeast Washington. So they're a massive mountain range. They have hundreds of drainages in them. And they are one of the most amazing ranges in the western United States.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Mike, you moved here in the 70s?
Late 70s, I came here to go to college.
Okay.
And I studied biology.
Uh-huh.
And I came
Now,
here.
which college? Just
Walla Walla College.
Walla Walla College, okay.
And I came here. My parents moved back from Africa. That's where I grew up, is in southeastern Africa.
Wow.
And that's where I started bird watching and collecting butterflies.
Oh.
Yeah. And the Blue Mountains have loads of butterflies.
Yeah, you mentioned you brought back over 2,000
Yeah,
butterflies. specimens
2,300 butterflies from Africa.
that are now scattered through the museums of the Northwest.
They are. And so that has, butterflies have always amazed me, because you find isolated pockets of individual species that are connected to the ice sheet that came out of Canada, and they're little islands. And they may not be located any more than in one little drainage. And so there is a lot to discover in the Blue Mountains as far as Lepidoptera go. We just don't know. And so really amazing place. Some other interesting things about the Blues is the geology. We actually have an area in the Blue Mountains that is entirely granitic and not basalt, which is really bizarre.
We non-geo... what
So-
the heck did you just say?
Granite.
So, granite. It's a granite base, and instead of a volcanic basalt base. And
Okay.
granite is what the Rocky Mountains are composed of. So to have a granitic portion of the Blue Mountains is, what is going on here? And then we have this andesite, which is identical to the Andes Mountains in South America and the South Pacific. And then to have all these plants that haven't really been looked at, and we're still discovering new species. The Blues are an exciting place to be.
I'm
Amazing.
glad it is. I'm glad was that the owlet just flew over?
No, pale swallowtail.
Okay, pale swallowtail
I
butterfly.
didn't see a thing. Okay.
Since we're talking about leopard.
So we're talking about butterflies. Very
So
cool.
the other thing about birds in the Blues is that the Blue Mountains have really strange weather patterns. And so typically, since 2008, in mid-June, we get cold weather. And that has often been very hard on Lepidoptera that emerge in mid-June, and I have seen it where it kills them entirely. They're gone. And you have to wait a couple weeks till the later species emerge and arrive. So
A tough place to be a butterfly.
it is a tough place to be a butterfly.
Certain species.
Yes. So birds also suffer because of that. So we get these cold snaps that hit, and it causes high mortality in young. So, yeah.
So, wow. I'm learned more about the Blue Mountains in 20 minutes here than I knew in my whole life. That's very cool.
So,
Very cool.
two of us made a 13-part series on the secret life of the forest. It's the name of it, of the northern Blue Mountains, and we did that in 2017.
That's a video series?
It's a 2-part video series, and it's on YouTube.
Oh, it
and you
is?
can watch it on YouTube.
Okay,
And
very
it's
cool.
called The Secret Life of the Forest.
The Secret Life of the Forest,
Whereas-
not the blues, but
yeah,
the forest
the
in general.
forest, and then and the northern Blue Mountains.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway,
That is
it's
on
on
my
there.
must-watch list.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you about that.
Yes. And
Remember we had, who's the fellow from Andy
Andy Stepniewski.
Oh, Andy, yeah.
He told us all about the steppe shrub habitat.
Yes.
I need to get him on the podcast too. But,
Yes.
Really?
now I'm learning about the Blue Mountain habitat, so that's uber cool.
So right now we are in the midst of filming The Secret Life of the Deserts of the Pacific Northwest, and we started last May, and we will end in September.
Okay.
So we've
that will
been
be also on YouTube eventually.
It will be, yes.
So that's got to be a huge undertaking.
It is.
Are you doing that with some professional photographers?
I
or how do you
have
do that?
had the good fortune of working with a gentleman named Daniel Biggs, and he has a master's in photography, and he is superb. And he filmed all the secret life of the forest, and when you see it, you will be blown away. His photography is
Well, I am excited.
phenomenal.
I'm excited. That
So
sounds like
we
can't
have-
miss video.
We have been going out filming the deserts since last May, and he averages 2,200 images a trip.
Okay.
So
This is still images? Or?
still video. We have GoPro, drone, you name it. Yes. So it's all
You're
there.
high tech, man.
Yeah,
You're
it's
high
all
tech. Or
there.
at least hanging out with a high tech guy.
Yeah, so it has been truly amazing. It was done under the auspices of a television station, the only TV station in Walla Walla, called Blue Mountain Television.
Okay.
And they are the platform that we operate from. And then we have been highly backed by many people in the community. So
Very
it's been
cool.
wonderful.
Very cool.
So
when do you expect this new one to be completed?
early 2021.
Okay.
So
So
yeah.
you've got another 6 or 8
Yeah.
months of work on that.
Right. And the editing, Dan does all the editing. I am the narrator and the writer, and Dan does the photography and the narration, or
Very
the
cool.
editing. So,
Very cool. That
yeah.
sounds super cool.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, your wife is also a fabulous
Oh.
birder. Blair Burnson told me she's really the good birder. So
Blair.
I'm throwing Blair under the bus here. Or maybe she said she's a good photographer. I don't know what he said. He
No.
certainly had some high accolades for her. I
Yes.
can't remember the details.
Mary Lynn is an oral birder.
That's
and,
what he told me. He said
Mary
she's got the
Lynn,
ears.
Yes, and Mary Lynn is a superb birder. And
I think that's the third bird there.
yeah, he's moved. So
moved, yeah.
that's why I think he is the dominant sibling.
Do you?
And these are the two chicks.
Did he
so-
push them off?
He looks smaller. No, they went left.
Oh, they went further down.
Okay.
Okay. The adult will be in here. What's amazing here at these Great Grays is that they're not mobbed by other birds. We've yet to see a stellar jay ever come in and bother them. The only other bird species I've ever seen bother them is this raven.
Oh, okay.
And the adult knows how to intimidate the raven. And so,
Puffs up and looks really
yeah,
big.
it looks huge. And so the raven
Doesn't give much
scrams.
grief.
Yeah.
You started to tell me about Mary Lynn's
So-
birding. I'm sorry.
Mary Lynn and I met because of birding.
Oh.
We were both on the board of the Blue Mountain Audubon Society,
Okay.
and that was 33 years ago. We've been married for 33 years.
Congratulations.
And she is a phenomenal birding partner, and it is a lot of fun.
Phenomenal enough that you share an eBird account, it looks like.
Yes, we do.
Not many people to see Mike and Mary Lynn Denny.
Yeah.
Mary Lynn, I don't remember which order it's in,
Yeah.
but you're like, okay, is that two people in one account? They really must get along
Yeah, yeah.
to share an eBird account.
Yeah. So we've birded all over the place. Been to Costa Rica and Canada, and here's one of the chicks.
Yeah, that's a
Look
chick
at that.
branching,
Moved over
yeah.
there.
He's doing the old wing exercise.
Pretend to fly thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So these chicks, when they get a hold of a prey item, the adult feeds it to them whole,
We saw
and
that.
they swallow it whole.
Oh, okay.
And so you see sometimes a pocket gopher that's 8-9 inches long, and they guzzle it right down.
From their mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From their bill.
Yeah.
Talking about how much Mike knows about these owls, we stopped and there was a large stump by the side of the road, and Mike points out, oh, that's a juvenile scree. A juvenile. He can identify how old the bird was that
Aged
pooped
it.
on the stairs.
Aged the scree
Aged
for
the
us.
scree. I thought that was pretty crazy.
Well, it's by virtue of longevity. So, some other interesting things about great gray owl. When I worked for the U.S. Forest Service, I would get put up on Table Rock Fire Lookout when the fire season started because they were short fire lookouts.
Right.
Seen some reports from there.
And one evening we were driving up and the floodlights from the vehicle went out over the Mill Creek watershed out beyond the fire lookout. And riding in the wind like you see a diurnal raptor do was a great gray owl out there over the Mill Creek watershed, just sitting there riding the wind,
Kiting
just like
on the wind.
kiting. I've never even heard of that. And yet he was in my headlights, in the floodlight of the vehicle, just out there, just riding the wind.
Phenomenal.
Right place at the right time.
I've not found that in any of the literature. And so when you're out and about and in places and circumstances you least expect to find them, there they are. And that was truly amazing. So that's at 6,250 feet.
That's high.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very high.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's the upper limits of there.
it is.
It is.
That's the upper limits of where they go. Yeah.
So tell me about the population of green-tailed towhees that are here. I know that's the other people come. Washington birders who are
Yes.
working on their state list have to come to the Blues
Yep.
for green-tailed towhee. We don't have to come here for great gray owl. We can go north for that.
Right.
Although I've been north 2,900 times, I feel like, and haven't gotten a great gray owl up there. But I finally came down here to get the guru himself to show it to
Well-
me. So that's cool. But anyway, tell us about the green-tailed towhee.
So green-tailed towhees are a common resident species in the southern Great Basin, and they are migrant species in the northern Great Basin, and we are on the edge of the Columbia Basin, which is a sub-basin of the Great Basin.
Okay.
So this is the northern periphery of their range, and they love steep sloped canyons. And down in Oregon, Northern California, parts of Idaho, they are highly dependent on coral leaf mountain mahogany. That's where you find them.
Okay. Well,
In the
that's
northern
a-
Blue Mountains, they like west and south facing slopes, and they love Rocky Mountain maple, what we call ocean spray, and nine bark. And that are the woody shrubs that they require. And so if I come into an area and I find resident spotted towhees on a south or north or east face or west facing slope, I start listening for green-tailed towhees because they often are together.
Okay.
And green-tailed towhees are highly territorial, and they will call frequently and sing. And if you get them between the middle of May to the middle of June, they are extremely vocal, and you will find them. One thing about them is that they give some very similar calls to spotted towhee. And my belief is that quite a few people have come to the Blue Mountains assuming they're hearing green-tailed towhees and go home with spotted towhee, not knowing. But green-tails give a very peculiar mew call that sounds like a house cat.
Okay.
And I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
These are those young owls.
That's the young great gray owls. But you hear that one call in there, that that's the adult.
Oh.
And she's trying to calm the young down. The adults in the area, we're here. We know where you are. So the adult's
through there
right up
somewhere.
in there. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Very cool. Sorry.
No, that's nothing to be sorry about there.
Yeah. Anyway, so green-tailed towhees are found on those south and west-facing slopes, and those are the thin-soiled lithosol slopes. And the western Blue Mountains all are under lithosol, which means shallow, rocky soils. And the deep soils, where all the big conifers are, where these great gray owls are all north and east-facing slopes.
Oh, okay. So you won't find them in the same place.
Will not. Never. And so we have 9 documented species of owls in this county. And the 9 species that are here are scattered across all habitats. So we have everything from burrowing owls out in the desert, where there's 6 inches of precipitation, to great gray owls and boreal owls, where there's 50 inches of precip. So makes a big difference.
Yeah. So
50 inches of precip.
50.
wow, that's a lot for out here. It seems
Yeah.
I had no idea.
This is the wet end of the Blue Mountains.
Okay.
Yeah.
good. Cool.
So
Mike, growing up in Africa, you grew up in South Africa or
in
southern
Zambia and Malawi,
Okay.
Southeast Africa,
What part of your youth did you spend there?
from 7 to 14 years old.
Okay.
So I went to school under the British system, and I had school in the mornings, and I had all afternoon to go collect butterflies and go birding.
Perfect.
Very cool. Kind of like that.
So I got to explore. I had very close African friends. My brother and I learned to speak the African language there, which was Chichewa, which is an Ngoni language, and the Ngoni are an off split of the Zulu. And so Chichewa was the language of both eastern Montana or eastern Malawi and southeastern Zambia.
Very cool.
So
So you were birded there and
I
butterflies.
birded there. Zambia has a little over 900 species of birds. Malawi has 1,100 species of birds, even though it's a third the size of Zambia. Kenya has 1,100 species of birds. So Southeast Africa and Eastern
Yes.
Africa is phenomenal birding.
Yeah, I got a chance to go to Kenya with James Bradley. I don't know if you know
Don't
James
know him.
Bradley. He's a biologist and a birder from Victoria, BC.
Okay.
And John Sterling, and he led a trip to Kenya,
Okay.
I think 2016, and a 15-day trip, and we kind of circled through the whole country. It was just
Yep.
a ridiculously cool trip. I mean,
Yeah.
oh my, 545 species, of which
Yeah.
about 512 were lifers. for
Yep.
me, I think.
Yep. So I can think, looking out my bedroom window when we lived in Zambia, we lived on the Malawi border, south of Chapata, Zambia, which is the regional capital.
Okay.
And I could look out my bedroom window and see paradise flycatchers on their nest. We had red-headed weavers that had nests on our veranda. I had puffback shrikes right off our lawn. We had the bird that I just loved, which was the eye-browed thrush. And they would feed in our yard, and they would winter in Africa from Europe.
Right.
And it was crazy. And so we would get all these European passerines during our summer dry season, and then we would have all these African birds there as well. I can remember helmeted guinea fowl walking through our yard, vervet monkeys in the trees in our by our house. I raised a duiker, an antelope, I had for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then he went wild. We returned him to the wild.
Good for him.
Wonderful animal. Leopards would come through our yard. Hyenas would come through our yard.
Oh my goodness.
It was an amazing place to grow up.
Were you folks birders? Did they help introduce
No.
you to birding? How did you get?
But
how'd
they
you,
were
How'd you become birders?
Well, they were extremely instrumental. So my mom got flashcards in Cape Town, South Africa.
Bird flashcards.
Yes, put them up in between the leaves on the breakfast table, and she would put 3 or 4 up every morning and quiz us on what is this, what is this, what is this, what is this, and then on the back of the flashcard was the text about what that species was and where it lived and how it survived. And so my brother and I both learned all those birds.
And 4 birds a day. It doesn't take long to have 100.
Yeah, yeah.
Hundreds of birds.
And then she had insects. She had plants. She had North American species flashcards. So we were constantly being bombarded with learning and memorizing these species.
Very fortunate.
Very.
Very fortunate.
And then my dad loved the outdoors. And as a kid, he grew up in Minnesota, hunting and fishing. And so I was not into hunting at all, but I loved fishing. And so in Africa, we would go fishing and had some harem-scarum experiences. But we would, when we first started fishing in Africa, we weren't very careful about crocodiles. We'd go stand right on river banks, and it was like, those stupid little boys, what are they going to learn?
Like crocodile bait?
That's
Yes.
right. And so we soon learned not to do that. But
Fortunately in time.
yes. But birding was phenomenal. I'll never forget it. And then on our way to Africa, we went by ship out of New York, 21 days on a Dutch freighter. And on that boat was an ornithologist going to Africa to
You're
study.
7 years old.
I'm 7. Going to Africa to study parrots. And he and I would sit on the fantail of that ship and watch seabirds. And he would identify them for me, and I would sit there just flabbergasted because the ship would throw their garbage out over the fantail, and all these seabirds would collect when the garbage went over. And that's where I saw my life wandering albatross, Cape petrels, you name it. Sperm whale.
Life birds from 7.
Yes.
Are they on eBird? Do you have them on eBird?
No, not yet.
Come on!
Get with it, huh? But anyway, so I started with seabirds, and when we got to Africa, it was mostly land birds, but truly amazing.
So you were curious from the time you were small.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you had parents who weren't birders, but who were interested in helping you learn about nature and
Yes.
encouraging.
Yes.
And then at 14, you moved back to the U.S.?
Came back to America, and we lived in McMinnville, Oregon.
Okay.
My dad taught high school there. And then
Were your parents teachers in Africa? Is
my
that what
mom was, well, my dad taught industrial arts.
Okay.
And he trained Africans how to build prefab metal buildings, how to weld, how to work on vehicles, you name it. And he worked at a school of industrial arts. It was a technical training center.
Very cool.
Nice.
And my mom taught surgical procedure. She was a nurse.
Wow.
And so she worked at a nursing school. And we had a large hospital there. And that's where she worked.
So you moved back to Oregon and,
we
picked
moved-
up your birding from there?
Yep, and started birding. I started going to Mount Hill Refuge in 1971 and have been there every year since.
Oh, it's a great.
So-
You didn't even miss the year when it was taken over?
Nope. Fortunately, they were gone.
Yeah, thank
But what a
goodness.
mess they made.
Yeah, that was a mess.
But it was, birding has always been a huge part of my life. I guess you would say it's a lifestyle. And so I, as a child and as a young adult, and now I've never been bored a day in my life. Not once. And
Ken
I
was telling
don't.
me that, was it Rachel or someone asked you sitting at dinner time that someone asked you if you're always thinking about birds?
Rachel, we were coming back on a trip, one of our trips. I take her out once a week. My wife is not a non-birder, but she's interested in seeing nature.
Yeah.
So we're driving back home, and she knows me very well, and she asked me a pointed question. Do you think about birds all the time when we're out? And I thought for, a second.
Yep.
And I said yes.
Yep. Yep.
Pretty much it's on the mind of a birder everywhere you go.
That's right.
I always told my kids I used to hate to go to the beach. Sitting in the hot sun on the sand, just uncomfortable, sitting on the ground, just was not my thing. And then I got into birding, and all of a sudden, I love to go to the beach, and gulls, and
let's go.
shorebirds, maybe a
Yes.
shearwater, who
Yep.
knows what you'll see.
So when Mary Lynn and I go to the beach, it's not quite the beach experience most Americans have. We set our scopes up right at the spray line, and especially in August at Long Beach or at Ocean Shores, and the city shearwaters are going by
There's
the
a shearwater
thousands.
show, yes.
And we set it up, and it is an educational opportunity, and people stop and go, "Are you looking at whales?" And I always go, "No, something entirely better than whales." And what's that? Well, it is one of the great biological events in the world.
Oh, you're a born teacher, Mike.
And we show them these shearwaters just off the break. And then they look, and it's like there's thousands of them. And
I never saw those before.
yeah, I've never seen that before. And you have people starting to collect around your scopes, and before long, it's the opportunity I'm creating. And then you have 25, 30, 40 people standing there, and you get to tell them about the biology of shearwaters.
Yes, isn't it great?
And how Oregon and Washington figure into that. And
Give us the story. Might as well
Oh.
educate some of our listeners. I have some
Well-
listeners that might not know.
Well, so sometimes off the Long Beach Peninsula, off of the Ocean Shores area, there'll be 100,000 sooty shearwaters passing by just beyond the break. And these are birds coming out of the Gulf of Alaska, and they're headed back to the south into Australia and islands off New Zealand where they breed. And this is a bird that covers roughly 40,000 miles in 1 year. And they are a shearwater, a tube nose. And by tube nose, they have these two special tubes on top of their bill, which allow them to get rid of salt out of water that they intake while they're feeding and drinking. And these tube noses, or shearwaters as they're called, puffinus, fly in these massive flocks, and they're feeding on squid. And they are nocturnal feeders. And so they eat tons of squid. They eat a lot of small surface fish, but they eat a lot of squid. And they fly in a flap, flap, glide. Flap, flap, glide.
Shearing the water.
Yes, just above the surface, literally just above the surface. And if it's weather, then the waves, and they shear along the face of a wave and drop over the top and shear the next wave. And they are truly phenomenal to watch. So what blows me away is there will be hundreds and hundreds of people on the beach walking along the break, just in front of the break, and they miss the whole thing, which is just 150 yards beyond them.
Yeah, it is something.
Because they have never learned to observe.
You see what you look for.
That's
You see-
right.
If you're looking for a buried quarter in the sand, you'll find a buried quarter in the sand.
That's right.
If you're looking for a shearwater,
Yep.
you'll find a shear, and you might find a fulmar, or you might find a storm petrel, or who knows
Yes.
what you'll find.
You might find a pink-footed shearwater out there.
Yeah,
Yes.
you never know.
No.
I think
So,
that's one of the great things about birding, I think, is people get into it. They've never heard of birding before. They get into it, and they find out there are things going around them every day that
Yep.
are truly miraculous.
yes.
Yeah.
And
It
it
is.
just brings a joy.
It is.
Yes.
And we go to the coolest places. I mean, we're in the Blue Mountains, sitting
Yep.
here, listening to great gray owl chicks. We saw the great
Yeah.
gray owl adult come in and feed them. And I mean, how many people get to see that?
Very
Nobody.
few.
Nobody. If
Very
you don't
few.
look for it.
Fantastic experience. In life.
So my old friend Ken Knittel
Ken Canoe, yes.
was a outstanding birder. Birded every county in Washington State. He knew them like the back of his hand.
Yeah.
And I know dozens of birders now that know every county in Washington State by the back of their hand.
Yep.
All 39 counties.
Yep.
And if you ever want to know about any Washington county, ask a birder.
Exactly.
Because they know the roads, they know the cities, they know the towns, they know those counties.
Ask Ken.
Yes.
One of the most
Don't ask me.
humorous
I can get
stories.
lost in a parking lot.
One of the most humorous stories from Ken Knittel is he published Washington Birder for years. And one of the articles that I will never forget is how to find house sparrows in, I believe it was Stevens County.
Yes, yes,
I looked at that and I said, oh my God, now this guy is a county birder.
yes, big time. So, county birding was basically introduced to Washington State by Ken Knittel.
Right.
And
He put up the website Washington Birder.
Yes.
It has the county birding pages with
Right.
county. You can download a county checklist for every county.
Right.
And Matt Bartell now has that fabulous Excel spreadsheet
Right.
that has it
Everything.
goes every county across, and it's specially figured out to figure out. So it'll add up how many Western Washington birds you have, how many Eastern Washington birds you have, by what county you saw them in, and if you fill it in, it's a lot of work to fill it in, but it's
It
pretty
is.
cool.
And I have to say, Lori Knittel was the one that did all the editing of their publication, Washington Birder. And so they both put in tremendous amount of time. But Ken's knowledge that he shared with birders of Washington State is phenomenal. and it has been a learning base, which a lot of people have utilized.
He will be missed, that's
always
for sure.
joking.
Yes, always.
Always joking.
So I could tell you story after story about Ken. We spent hundreds and hundreds of hours birding with him. He lived in Walla Walla, and we would bird with him a lot. And funny, funny man.
Yeah, I did not know King
Yeah.
Croy.
He lived in Walla Walla for a while? I
Yeah,
didn't know
long
that.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I worked with him.
Ah.
Yeah.
Did he work for the Forest Service?
No.
also? No, you just worked with
He
him.
worked
on,
for Walla Walla College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, listen, they're
Yeah,
moving
they're back
around
again.
now. They're right here. Anyway, one other thing about green-tailed towhees, and that is that they frequently start their molt before they leave here in August.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see them in really odd molt. And
So the adults.
yes, the adults.
Their flight feathers, they start moving, or their
They're
body-
secondaries.
secondaries?
Yeah, and so it's really weird.
So you see some big holes
Yeah,
on the inside of their wings.
Yeah, it's kind of strange.
That is kind of strange. Most
Yeah,
birds
most
take
birds
off.
are already down there.
Yeah, molt strategy is such a crazy.
Yeah.
Different species
Yeah.
have different strategies. Some molt before they go south. Some molt
Wave-
after they go south.
Yep.
Some stop halfway in molt.
Yep.
Some stop here and there in molt.
Yep,
It's all
yep.
kind of crazy.
So it's nuts.
Well, they're hopping skippers.
They are.
They don't.
They
probably
are.
Go fly
No.
300 miles a night.
Yeah.
So what I always tell people is that spring migration is a very rapid, focused
Exactly.
movement.
Mm-hmm.
And those birds want to get to their territory and their habitats immediately because they want to be able to
Imperative.
nest.
They need to get there to breed.
Breeding imperative.
Fall migration starts here. Our first migrants arrive here from the north on the 19th of June.
Mm-hmm.
And it lasts till October 15.
Yeah.
So it's a long, drawn-out, slow thing.
What's the hurry?
Yep.
Yeah.
4
exa-
months.
Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't matter to those migrants whether they get to the next county next week or not. It's
And that's in some part weather driven too.
Oh, it is.
If it gets if there's a cold snap, things will move out.
Yeah.
Raptors, you see that especially.
Yep.
I mean, raptors, the
Yep.
hawk watchers, they watch the weather reports. They know when the birds are going to be coming.
Yep, yep. But I look at passerine movements. We see some species lag behind clear into the middle of September, end of October.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're not worried. But when those first cold snaps hit,
Bam, they're out of
they're
here.
gone.
We're out of here, baby.
That's another fun thing about birding is you learn the timing of nature.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
You
You
sure
learn
do.
You see what's going on.
Yeah. I write a monthly column for the Walla Walla Union Bulletin on the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be coming out this coming Sunday. And the interesting thing is I always write about either birds or mammals, insects, butterflies. And this coming Sunday's is on white-faced ibis and great gray owl.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check that
So,
out.
yeah.
I'm sure it's on. You can
It's
get it
online.
It's online?
Yeah, Walla Walla Union Bulletin, Sunday
cool.
edition.
Sunday
Okay.
edition.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway, to be able to come up here, I'm exactly 19 miles from Walla Walla,
Okay.
and I'm sitting here looking at great gray owls.
Yeah.
That's as closest to the location I'll ever tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. And you can't find it on eBird anymore.
No,
because
it
they're
won't
hidden.
be on
Sen-
eBird.
Sensitive species.
Yeah, yeah,
You gotta know somebody like
Yeah.
Ken to get him to bring you, and then
Yeah.
you have to not tell everybody. So
yeah.
That's cool.
But there's a lot of other species that are unique here. We have dusky grouse, which is large native grouse. We have ruffed grouse, and both of those grouse species now are suffering because of the introduction of the wild turkey. And wild turkeys now are found clear to 5,500 feet in the Blue Mountains.
wow.
And they form up into flocks in October, November of 300 plus birds in a single flock,
Yeah.
and it's devastating. So,
Yeah, I did a Thanksgiving podcast last year on wild turkeys and their reintroduction. I mean, they were an endangered species. I want to say in the 30s or something like that.
Yeah.
Not endangered, but they were threatened. Numbers were way down from hunting, and it took them a lot of tries to figure out how to reintroduce them. They finally figured out that they could catch them with cannon nets, and
yeah,
they used that to catch them. And they found that they had to bring the adults and have the chicks raised in an area for them to survive, to be taught by their parents and all this stuff. And I think they learned way too well.
Yeah. So the wild turkey that's here, that was originally planted here, was the Miriam's wild turkey from the eastern seaboard, and they could not take our hot weather.
They failed.
They failed totally. And then they thought, well, that failed, so we'll do something else. So they brought in the Rio from the southwest, and it has exploded.
I think that latest go-round the wildlife department had, where they brought in all 3 subspecies, and they put them matched them to habitat and climate.
Yeah.
That was the one that made them take off.
Well, unfortunately, they did well.
Yeah.
Very well.
So I'm no fan of turkeys. So anyway.
Yeah.
But some other interesting things about birds in the blues is that on hot afternoons, some of the best things you can do is to bring a couple gallons of water with you, pour the water into a depression in the road, a puddle, and sit there in a chair and watch.
Watch see who comes and drinks.
We've had as many as 30 species of birds come to a puddle.
Oh my gosh.
On a hot afternoon.
Not to mention a few butterflies.
And all the butterflies.
Oh my gosh.
And it is truly amazing.
That would be fun.
Cool. That would be a blast. Yeah.
Another thing that we do is...
Can bring extra water.
Can we come back?
Another thing we do is we'll come out into the blues and hang a hummingbird feeder up. And this is the only area in Washington State where you could possibly see 5 species of hummingbirds.
And they are?
Broad-billed.
Broad-billed.
Oh, wow.
Annas, Rufus, Calliope, and black-chinned.
So broad-billed are very unusual here, though, aren't
except in the blues.
they? They are. Do you have
South
them
of
in the
us,
broad-billed?
they breed here.
No, I don't have one.
Yeah, they come into Walla Walla County. So you could...
Sounds like another trip, Ken.
It sounds like we need to tap Mike for that one.
So anytime in mid to late June and into July, they can appear.
Okay.
We've had them in our yard in Walla Walla.
Wow.
Yeah, I know they straggle around. But
Yeah.
So they're annual.
Yeah.
Wow.
Small numbers, but they're
Annas
here.
are moving in too, aren't they?
Yeah. Annas now are here annually every winter. And we believe they're breeding in Walla Walla
Probably
now.
are.
I see reports all the
They
time.
are
Yeah.
everywhere else. Why wouldn't they be here?
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to share with your listeners one more thing, and that is the arrival of species in my lifetime here that there were no records prior. One is the Buick's wren. Jewett and Gabrielson never saw Buick's wrens in the Blue Mountains. Never. And they arrived here in 1979 was the first one that we found in Fort Walla Walla Park in Walla Walla. And now they go all the way into Penticton, BC, all the way up into the panhandle of Idaho.
Wow.
The other is the lesser goldfinch. Lesser goldfinch and the population we have come out of southeastern Oregon and western Idaho. And they have come out of the Great Basin, and now they are an abundant breeding species in the lower Columbia Basin. And they're moving north, and they now have reached Adams County, Grant County, and Yakima County, and they're moving north.
Wow.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Red-naped sapsucker.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. Yes. Got it.
Just called.
Cool.
So the lesser goldfinches now used to only be found around Lyle in Klickitat County. And those were the population coming out of the eastern slope of the Cascades. Now
This is a different
population coming out of southern Idaho and Utah, and they're here now. And
we had tons of them last winter.
2 different populations in western and eastern.
Right.
Yeah,
There he is.
He's probably in that dead tree right
yeah,
there.
probably is.
Anyway, so that's been amazing to watch these 2 species
In a short period of time. Very
25
short.
years.
Yeah. Short period
They're
of time.
here, and now their population's expanded clear
Not
into
to mention Anna's hummingbird.
right, and Anna's hummingbird as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
those moved in there.
So the first Anna's was in 2001. Arrived December of 2001 at the mayor of College Place's home, and he called me. His name was Wilbur Holly. And Mr. Holly said, hey, I've got a hummingbird in my yard. What's going on? And that next week it was there. It was a beautiful male, and it went down to 11 above. And he wrapped heat tape around a hummingbird feeder, plugged it in, and that hummer fed from before first light to almost dark.
Right there.
All day long. And
Drained that feeder once a day.
Oh my gosh.
oh, a couple. Yeah.
Love
And
it.
Wilbur Holly was so excited about having a hummingbird in December.
First hummer.
And I have photographs of that male hummingbird sitting there with chunks of ice frozen into the bush he's sitting on. Yeah. Yeah. So
Well, pretty soon you'll have scrub jays, you know.
well, they're exactly 50 miles from us, and we know they'll be here. Yeah. So and great-tailed grackles, we now have had records of them here, and they're moving north.
They're moving north. Yeah.
And the scrub jay, we expect both of them, because we had wood houses appear at Timothy Island out by Clarkston in the early 2000s, and then we have California coming from the west
Coming the
side.
other way.
Yeah. So we could end up
So
with
which
both.
one are you going to get first? That's the
I don't
question.
know.
It'll be the California.
I
That's my
suspect.
guess.
Yeah. But so we have all these birds moving north as our climate continues to alter and change. And here we call it climate shift, because things are shifting. And by shift, I mean we have longer, drier, warmer falls that now stretch clear into early January. And we have longer, colder, wetter springs that start in mid-January and go clear into June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things are changing. That is
Oh,
for
it's
sure.
a major shift.
He shifted
For
it.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, Mike,
So-
I'm going to wrap this up.
Yes.
It has been this is a first for me. Watching a Great Gray Owl while I record a podcast with a local pro. So
Well-
that is cool. But anyway, Mike, are there any things you wanted to make sure you get into, causes to push, or people to mention, or how to get a hold of you, or anything like that?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, if people have a chance to go birding, do it, because it is a stress reliever. It is an opportunity to expand your horizons of your life, and it puts you into a world where conservation matters. And whether most people recognize it or not, conservation matters. But when you're out there in the natural world, you see where it really matters. And so I would urge folks that are listening to get outside, and even if they don't want to watch birds, pick up something, identify the native plants, or go after photograph butterflies. There's so much you can do. The other thing is join a conservation organization. I can't stress that enough, because together we're much more vocal and have much more sway than if you're a single person out there. So I would urge you, look at the Washington Ornithological Society or your local Audubon Society. Very important. There's the American Birding Association, which is very important. So anyway.
Very cool. So let's just finish with about a minute of quiet. The birds are just very vocal. So Mike, tell us what we're hearing here.
Oh, beautiful.
Fox sparrow.
I hear right over here,
Hermit thrush.
hermit thrush singing like mad.
Fantastic sound.
Yes, it's the sound of higher elevation.
It is.
Yeah, we had Veery and we had Swainson's thrushes sound lower today.
Yeah.
3-spot breasted thrushes
Yeah.
this morning.
Yeah. So, what is it? A little after 1?
I don't know. Yeah,
12:15.
a little afternoon.
12:15. So, usually by 12, most birds have quieted down, and they will start singing and calling again by about 4:30, 5
Right.
o'clock.
Right.
So,
I thought, hey,
Yeah.
let's take a listen here.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks again, Mike.
you
Ken,
bet.
my sidekick here with me too. That's extra special. And thanks again. Take care now. Well, that wraps up the Bird Banter podcast, episode number 63 with Mike Denny. I had a blast doing this episode. I hope that came through in the recording. I hope you enjoyed it. That's 1 hour of the 3 days Ken and I spent in southeast Washington, birding the Blue Mountains and the rest of Walla Walla County and surrounding areas. If you want to learn more about that trip, I wrote a nice trip report on the Bird Banter podcast website, birdbanter.com. Check under the Ed's Field Notes area. I'll also leave a supporting blog post to talk about some of the things that Mike talked about during this episode. Land trusts are super important. Great Gray Owls are really cool. I'll leave some photos there. Mike showed us around the rest of Walla Walla County for the whole day. Ken and I, we thought, oh, it's so nice of Mike to show us these owls. We thought, he'll pick us up, take us out, show us the owls. He'll be leaving by 2 or so in the afternoon. Not to be. When Mike takes us out for a day, he took us out for a day. We finished the day by watching the sunset over Rattlesnake Mountain about 5 minutes to 9. So we were birding a seriously long day and had so much fun. Besides the great gray owls that we talk about during this episode, we saw ferruginous hawks. There are not a lot of ferruginous hawks in Washington. I think there may be 40 or 50 birds altogether. We saw 11 of them on the one day we were out with Mike Denny in Walla Walla County. It is the high density area for ferruginous hawks in Washington, way down in the southeast corner. And Mike knows that county like nobody else. We had a terrific time. I got some nice photos of those birds. You can find those photos on the blog post that supports this episode, along with a trip report that I wrote on the same Bird Banter blog under Ed's Birding Notes section. You can check that out too for a lot more pictures of that. Ken and I had such a terrific weekend. We took off early and tried chasing the least tern that was seen in King County the day before, but we missed on that, so got a start about 9 o'clock for eastern Washington. Pretty much drove straight through to Bateman Island in Benton County. Neither of us had birded Benton County much during the summer. I had been there last year for a little bit in the fall. We got quite a few new county birds and had a really good time there. Gray catbird, Bullock's oriole, just some beautiful birds. Had a nice time there. From there, we went on to Walla Walla County, where we went to the Millet Ponds and the Blood Ponds. Blood Ponds, what a horrible name for a place, but it's right beside a cattle yard. And I think that the difficulty with packing plants may be playing a big issue in Washington too. Usually when we go by the blood ponds to look at the wetlands area there and look for owls and bank swallows and that sort of thing, we see a fair number of adult cattle in the cattle yards. But this time there were hundreds and hundreds of young cows in the feed yard. Now, I don't think they usually put them there that time. I think they usually, raise them in the fields and bring them in just to fatten them up before slaughter there. God, it just was really sad to me to see hundreds and hundreds of little cows there. It looked like they were just going to kill them young or something. I don't know what the whole story was, but it was not a pleasant sight. Anyway, we got barn owls and bank swallows and a nice variety of birds there. Went out to the Millet Ponds. If you get a chance in Walla Walla County, be sure to check out the Millet Ponds. It is a terrific area. And while we were there, we saw American avocets and black stilts, sort of expected species. Got our first of the year Eastern kingbird. Eastern phoebes have been seen in Spokane. We didn't go out there for that. Eastern kingbirds. We also saw lots of black-crowned night herons, which are a tough bird to find a lot of places in Washington, and had a nice time walking around there, and battle mosquitoes. From there, we got our first hotel during the pandemic time. We stayed at a hotel in Walla Walla, and it worked out fine. It seemed quite safe. They had good precautions. The room was clean. You kind of had a no-touch check-in. There was no meal in the morning or anything. And it seemed like no big deal to stay in a hotel. So that worked out nicely. We met Mike the next morning. He took us out birding for the whole day. We talked a little bit about that episode time while we're in the Blue Mountains on the podcast. But after that, we got to see green-tailed towhee up Biscuit Ridge Road and calliope hummingbirds, quite a few of those, just really fun birds, tough birds to find in Washington unless you go to the right areas. So we got to see those and had a terrific day. I also put some pictures of the sunset. This is like it's the end of the day. It's like 8:30. We are just like pretty schnoggered. And Mike says, "Oh, it'll be worth waiting for the sunset. It's going to be spectacular." And he was right. It was worth waiting for the sunset. It was spectacular. So we didn't head off for our destination till around 9 that night. So it was a really, really cool day. We just had so much fun. And Mike, one of the really funny parts of the day was Mike is just an all-round naturalist. He seems to know everything about everything. He's a retired biologist. He knows the plants. He knows the animals. He knows the geology. He knows the butterflies. He was a big butterfly guy. And so we looked at all sorts of cool stuff for them the whole course of the day. Just had an absolute blast. Again, photos of a lot of this will be in the blog posts that I mentioned earlier. And we had so much fun. Just a terrific day. And on the way home, Ken and I decided rather than go back up into southeast Washington, we would just work our way along the Columbia River. So we went along the north shore of the Columbia River and stopped at some places along there. We stopped at the Balch Cemetery in the Balch Road area looking for acorn woodpeckers and white-breasted nuthatch and ash-throated flycatcher. Ash-throated flycatchers are not easy to find in Washington either, again, unless you go to the right places. Ash-throated we got. We did not find an acorn woodpecker. There's a granary tree there we look for acorn woodpeckers at. It's really far away, looking far away in a scope, and there aren't a lot of birds around, so we had no luck at all with acorn woodpeckers or white-breasted nuthatch. But we had a terrific day. Another great day for butterflies. Good Lord, there were butterflies all over the place. I have got a bone up on my butterflies. It would add a lot to birding. But I'm, un poco a poco, as my daughter Jean would say from Costa Rica. Un poco a poco, little by little, I'll learn things here and there. So after Stefan Schlick last week and Mike this week and being out with Ken, I have got to get into butterflies more. They're so beautiful, and it'll be nice to know what I'm looking at. So I did get the new butterfly book, the Pile Butterfly book that Stefan talked about, and I've got some learning to do. So butterflies I've got to get over. So let's hope I can do that. Anyway, we had a great trip home, stopped in Skamania County, a couple of places, just checked around, had a run-in. Run-in's not quite the right word, but some fellow on a pickup truck stopped us to let us know that our car was a little too far out in the road for him, and that he wanted to know what we were doing there. We told him we're bird watching. He says, "Well, tell me what birds." I said, "Well, pretty much all kinds of birds." He says, "Well, tell me, how can I get rid of them? I want to kill them all." He just was after us, trying to pick a fight. He asked us, "You guys queer?" Anyway, he was having a rough day, I guess. I'm not sure what was going on, but we managed to avoid getting enough big fight. Just a little argument, or mostly listen to his side of an argument while his bluster wore off. Anyway, had a nice time there, except for that little run-in, and then got home safely. So had a terrific 3 days in southeast Washington. Mike Denny rocks that Walla Walla County. We had so much fun, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for listening, and until next time, good birding, good day.